So chat, let's dive into this. Pagan and I are going to start us off. We're going to hit record here in a second, and then we're going to play this intro music. Here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the Chaos and Shadow podcast. My name is Kyle, and I'm joined here by my co-host, Pagan. How you doing this week?
Doing great. So excited for tonight's episode.
I know. And listen to that cool theme music. We just got it all faded out nicely here so we can do that live on Twitch while we're doing it. So a reminder to everyone out there listening in the podcast space, this episode's being recorded on, well, actually, I should say broadcasted live on Twitch at the time. So throughout, we'll take some questions from the audience as appropriate. We'll work them in here. And tonight's episode, I guess we should say, is about sleep paralysis. And we're going to segue a little bit into shadow people. Are you excited, Pagan?
Yes, I'm so excited.
Now, this one was kind of your idea, right? This is a little bit... You want to tell them about that?
Yeah, I can totally tell them about it. So we decided that because we took such a huge, long chunk of time with our last state of New Hampshire, that we kind of felt like everyone needed a palate cleanser, even us. And so everybody's kind of been asking us to dive into specific topics within the paranormal, but we can't really seem to figure out how to fit them in. So lo and behold, now we have a whole new thing that we're going to do between areas, I suppose, not necessarily states, but areas, that are going to be our palate cleanser episodes like this one. And we decided to actually start with sleep paralysis because we had a lot of people actually starting to submit stories about it to us. And so we wanted to see what we could find out, where the split between medical and paranormal begins, and all that. But we'll talk more about that here in a few minutes.
Yeah, no, I think that was very well said. Like you covered there well. We want to give you guys little palate cleanser episodes. And like you pointed out, it is a huge struggle trying to figure out where do you begin chipping away at the massive glacier, huge glacier that is paranormal stuff. I mean, when you start at one corner, you immediately need to run the whole way to the opposite, because in these last episodes, we've name dropped things like fae, demons, all the rest. To some degree, I would say if anyone out there is listening to any of these episodes and we say something that you guys don't know, first of all, feel free to write into the show. But second of all, nothing wrong with popping open Google on the side, because it is something we want to address. We want to start doing these more, maybe we could call them almost like fundamentals episodes, where we talk about a large concept, because again, it's gonna apply throughout. I have no doubt that as we keep diving through states, we're going to see large encounters with shadow people and sleep paralysis. So again, we're trying to get you guys the lexicon of knowledge, but that is going to be very hard to get you those words, that jargon. It's going to be something that we need to piecemeal together. And as Peg and I have said, we like to look at this show as like a campfire story where we're bringing some famous cases and some smaller cases to light. So hopefully you guys bear with us. And like I said, if there's ever a question, you're more than welcome to ask, and we will do our very best to try and incorporate that. And in some ways, we are going to try and work off of smaller definitions too, so that we're giving you guys the words that you need, teaching you maybe some vocabulary, but without popping open that whole other can of worms at the wrong moment or something like that. So hopefully this is going to work out very well for you guys. We want to make it as succinct as possible. I will say before we dive into the stuff this week that we have so many amazing things going over on Patreon. Huge thank you to all of our subscribers. I think we're going to save that for the end, but I kind of want to do it at the start and do a shout out to Sarah, Ninth Pawn, Red Got Games, and Prince of Nothing, who are all supporting us over there. You guys have been keeping us doing amazing things like writing articles. I did a UFO one this last week. On the free side, Pagan knocked out another Tarot Tuesday, which people are loving. So if anyone wants to check that out, again, totally free. We did our, our commentary episode.
Yes.
That was fun. You want to talk very briefly about that, Pagan? What we kind of did with it?
Yes, absolutely. This week's, or I should say this month, I feel like we're already in September, even though we're still in August. But this month's commentary episode was actually over the new Unsolved Mysteries, Berkshire,
UFO,
Massachusetts UFO incident. And so we talked a little bit about it. We talked a little bit about our thoughts on the show in general, but we also talked a lot about the case itself and how it actually tied in with some of our cases that we've already covered. So if you guys are interested in that, head over to Patreon and check it out.
And that's true. And that some of that stuff comes out for as low as $5 a month, you guys. A cup of coffee supports the stream and get you a whole bonus episode. And like I said, you can choose to optionally go up from there. All helps the stream, all gets us growing as a brand, keeps our hardware and all that in line. So thank you again to everyone that goes way above and beyond to do that. Glitchy Boy in chat said, I like my coffee. Well, you know what's even better than coffee is coffee plus an episode of Chaos and Shadow bonus. So again, thank you guys for that. Without further ado, Pagan, shall I kick it off about the medical side of this phenomena?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, let's knock this right out of the park to begin. So, sleep paralysis, is it real? First of all, yes. Medically, it is totally an understood thing. There's many medical sources online that go into it. My mother is also a respiratory therapist who I was able to poke and just ask her about it too. I was like, do you know about this? Because she's only semi-open to the paranormal. So it was fun to hear her kind of more skeptical or like analytical professional approach, because she's someone, the respiratory therapist, fits people for their CPAP machines and all that good stuff. And as we'll dive in, those are kind of triggers to this. So, without further ado, it should be said that we're not medical professionals. Nothing we give in this episode should be taken as strict medical fact, nor should you go out and try and apply anything you hear and expect that we can substitute for your doctor, because we definitely cannot. Maybe your witch doctor, but not your actual doctor. So, what the heck is this phenomena when medically speaking? Well, I got this from a great article on Very Well Health. They had a very nice little explanation, actually two, one that talked about symptoms and I think one that talked about causes. So first of all, sleep paralysis is the presence or persistence of features of rapid eye movement, aka your REM sleep. And basically that's your transition in and out of sleep. So it may also occur when you're first falling asleep. Otherwise, usually it happens when you're waking up. Estimated to occur to a whopping 20% of healthy people. That is wild. I also heard someone else out there on the internet claiming that about 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 people may have that happen to them. And again, healthy folks. So it's happened to me personally. During REM sleep, your mind is active. You might actually have vivid images, sights, sounds, other feelings, kind of hallucinations, if you will. And actually, there's strong linkings to hallucinations. Might be afraid, might feel like it's a nightmare. At the same time, your body is paralyzed, which is the super scary part for most people. So it is very concerning in many ways. And basically, kind of summarize all of that, and we'll dive in deeper. But to summarize that sort of stuff, it's like your brain has woken up when your body hasn't. And I guess I should add on there that, again, medically, your body locks itself when you're sleeping at night so that you're not wandering around, so you're not acting out those dreams. Otherwise, anytime you have maybe a fighting dream, you're a superhero, you might be like punching your mom. So the human body tries to prevent you doing that or trying to fly out of a window by, actually locking your body down. I've heard this, and I shouldn't maybe say this as fact, but I've also heard that kind of dogs lack the strong part of that, hence why you'll see them running a lot in their dreams. They're not as locked down as us humans because they jump in and out of their sleep phases way quicker too, right? So if you want like a kind of an example of what would happen if we didn't have this paralysis, there you go, your own dog. But for us, again, the shady part is when you're awake, but your body is not. Pagan, have you had this happen to you?
I don't think I've ever had actual sleep paralysis. No, I've had some scary incidences with sleepwalking, but that's a totally different thing.
Ooh, actually, because you're right, it is. But I wondered how much of a degree, right? Because that would probably be the opposite of sleep paralysis then, right? Because that is that mechanism failing you and your body's going up and doing.
Yeah, I would say so.
You remember when people were like eating their phones in the 90s off of like... Oh, I don't know if it was one of those sleep aids. Do you remember hearing that?
No.
I want to say, I'm sorry. Here goes our Ambien sponsorship. And Ambien, I'm sorry if this wasn't you. I'm pretty sure it was. It was that huge phase. It was whoever had like that butterfly commercial, and it would come through the window and like land on them. And
yeah, that was
them. And then a lot of news articles were coming out, and I don't know how true all of these were. I'm just going off of memory, but there were stories like man tries to peanut butter his phone and eat it. And by the way, not cell phone. This is like 90s style, like larger phones. And he's trying to cook that up in the kitchen in the middle of the night. So be careful about your sleep aids, chat. This is a well-known concern. So, Pagan, you said you haven't had it, and that's interesting.
No.
I, on the flip side, have. It's definitely a creepy thing. Do you want to maybe talk about some of the types of encounters you can have?
Yes, I can totally talk about some of those types of encounters. So some of those encounters, you might have experiences of the sexual nature with an incubus or a succubus, and where some folks will claim terrible sexual violating acts will happen to them during these events, and that usually is involving an incubus or a succubus. Or you'll have some sort of presence of like a weight on your chest. People have reported feeling like a decomposing body just toppled down on top of them. The other things that they would experience would be the feeling of an intruder or a malevolent entity, and vestibular motor hallucinations, also known as an out-of-body experience. So that's kind of where it goes from the medical side to the paranormal side. But interestingly enough, we're going to talk a little bit about how the brain can make you think that it's paranormal when it's actually not.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, so that was interesting to find out that, again, I'd seen it summarized down to 3 recurring, like Pagan said, an incubus or a weight on the chest. I've had the weight on my chest just once in my life. It wasn't, I guess the intent or like the feeling that maybe like the underlying track to said waking sleep paralysis sort of thing was definitely a malevolent sort of thing. I want to say all these years later, like it wasn't that big of a deal. It hasn't left a huge scarring fear in my life. But I think at the time it was. And like I said, I definitely remember a weight on my chest. I've had some other sleep paralysis that definitely tends to be that second one you mentioned. That's maybe like a lot more the intruder feeling or a malevolent entity in the room. I heard a lot of folks online describing this as maybe like a shadow person in their doorway or all kinds of things like that. And then finally the out of body, which you and I were kind of talking about, leans a little bit closer to like the astral projection side because you're floating. The cases in that are very much what traditional astral projection is, where you're floating around the room and seeing your body. So very, very interesting.
So yeah, it is definitely very interesting. So I guess the question is, what makes this a medical thing go from medical to paranormal? And even if it's dreams or hallucinations, the question ultimately is, why are so many people seeing the same thing? Even if these people don't have any connection to the paranormal, like they are just not interested, don't know about it. And not only that, a lot of people also feel like they're being kind of abducted by aliens at the same time. And some of these people that are describing this feeling have never even looked into alien abductions, don't know anything about it or anything beyond kind of what they see in Hollywood. So why is it that so many people are seeing those different scenarios happening or experiencing versus seeing these scenarios happen to them, and everybody's pretty much saying the exact same thing?
Bingo. That really leads well into the paranormal because up until what we said so far, that is at least all agreed on medically to some extent, of course, that, people, your body will just do the locking down. That is normal. What really stands out, like you said, is how common these tropes or archetypes, I guess, that are appearing in the corner. There's a story we'll get into later about a certain hat man that a lot of people see, but it was really interesting. I think one of the last videos I wound up watching was on YouTube where they had someone with their doctorate, I think of psychology, and then I think the other person was a medical doctor, I want to say, and they were both trying to explain it from different standpoints. Both of them were very interested in the recurring imagery. And
Mhm.
the guy that was more the PhD, he could have been anthropology a bit too, because he was very much talking the cultural side of things. He was trying to find maybe cultural links. One that was actually a really good one was the Freddy Krueger idea. He goes, well, many people may inadvertently be channeling a Freddy Krueger sort of vibe, especially when we talk about this Hat Man later. Freddy Krueger has a hat he appears in dreams, the idea of getting attacked in bed. Doesn't really explain older cases, though, pre-Freddy Krueger. And I'm a guy that doesn't even like that sort of show. I would never personally seek out Nightmare on Elm Street sort of thing. It's just not my jam. Sorry, cult classic people out there.
You're not wrong.
It's just not my thing. So I doubt he would be appearing in the corner of my eye. And I'm so glad, Pagan, because off camera, you and I had said to each other, like, why don't more people see fluffy unicorns and rainbows and happy things? Why aren't there puppies jumping on your chest instead of a demon just sitting there? That'd be a lot better. You can smother me in a puppy blanket any day. But that is the question. Why is it all this mean, dark, unknown? And they haven't exactly figured it out. We'll touch a little bit on it later as we talk about kind of what cortexes of the brain get triggered and all that. But I don't know. How are you feeling on this subject, Pagan? What do you think about these occurrences?
I'm thinking that it's just extremely interesting, but like you, I guess when it comes to the quote unquote Hat Man, I would never associate with Freddy Krueger because I've never seen Nightmare on Elm Street. So even if I had experienced this, how many people have not seen Nightmare on Elm Street but have had this happen and have seen the quote unquote Hat Man? And then at that point, you can't really say, oh, it's, linking it to Freddy Krueger and all that, because some of those people, I guarantee, have never seen him. Don't even know what he looks like. I didn't even know what he looked like until I played Dead by Daylight.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah. How did you escape Freddy Krueger that long? Oh,
it just didn't seem appealing to me. It was never an appealing movie to me. Sorry, Hollywood, but y'all should have tried harder.
So that is actually an interesting point where I guess I will point something out just for the sake of it, where in I guess letting some of this sink into our brain, we don't necessarily need to watch all of it so much as even know of it, because that's how the brain works. It doesn't, you can accidentally write the plot to a film you've never seen before, and then, you say to your friend, that sounds like a terrible film, I would never watch this. And they're like, that's only the credits. You totally misunderstood. So it is an interesting thing. I'm just going to throw that out there. It doesn't sound like, you mentioned not even knowing what he looked like, and so you played that game recently. And definitely not going to be the answer for everyone. 12-sided guy in our Twitch chat here is saying even the Amish have reported things that match these sightings. So Amish people, again, being very, segregated from traditional society in terms of technology. I doubt they're going to be Freddy Krueger experts. Pagan, I'd be very surprised if they heard about Freddy Krueger before you did in that case.
Same.
So
I would very much think that the Amish have no idea. Because as far as I know, that any sort of like outside kind of sources, even short of maybe like a newspaper, I think maybe even newspapers are actually banned in Amish culture. Oh. So that's, for them to quote unquote know a Freddy Krueger would be extremely rare, and something would have had to have happened for them to actually know that. And it's just highly unlikely. So
we have some stuff here about paralysis around the world. Would you like to touch on that, or shall I?
Yes. We can actually. There's quite a few different things.
Split them.
Split it down the middle.
Okie doke. You want to dive in first?
Yeah, I was gonna say let's talk about Brazil. Brazil, and there are folkloric tales of a creature with long fingernails that lurks on people's rooftops at night. The creature is called a pisaderia.
Yeah, that looks right.
I'm probably butchering that, but I'm guessing that's pretty close. Comes into a person's house and tramples on their chest of those who sleep.
Oh, jeez. Yikes.
So that one to me sounds a lot like the old hag kind of stories that we hear about with sleep paralysis, but we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But first, let's go from Brazil to Spain. In parts of Spain has a tale of a pasanta a black animal, often a dog or a cat, that invades people's homes and sits on their chest while they are asleep, making it difficult for them to breathe and even causing nightmares.
Yikes.
So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that maybe the pisaderia from Brazil is what's might be people are thinking with the old hag kind of stories that we hear associated with the sleep paralysis?
Well, I definitely can't ignore the connection between Spain and Brazil when, colonizing colonialism in the South American area. Huge Spanish and Portuguese influence down there. So I could definitely see these two stories even being merges of one another in a way. I don't speak
Great.
many, if at all, Spanish. I think I know no words in Spanish, really. But they kind of look very similar on paper, too. The Pasanta and the Pisaderia. Like, it kind of makes me wonder if some of that is a trickle down. Clearly a change in the appearance of it, going from a dog or a cat to some sort of, otherwise creature that's jumping on your chest and things like that. But it makes me kind of wonder if some of sleep paralysis, I guess it brings up a larger, just more meta question going forward. Are some cultures maybe more predisposed to it in terms of even just the lore of it? Like, do some of them have more built-in lore and mythology sort of things? But that's a question I'm just posing to the universe that we'll kind of see as we move through.
That is a very interesting kind of thing when it comes to the culture as well. And this is not something that I would say that is just unique to one type of culture. It's everywhere. I literally just picked and chose when I was coming up with our notes and all that, different cultures. And I only grabbed 4 or 5 of them because it's everywhere. It's not just a singular culture that has sleep paralysis. Everybody has it. Which, if it's a worldwide phenomenon, I would say that there's something definitely more than medical, because the whole world wouldn't be experiencing something if it was just simply a medical thing.
Well, I guess I will ask a question off of that. When you say the whole world wouldn't experience it, do you mean like they wouldn't have the same recurring patterns, or do you mean okay?
Recurring patterns, yes.
I was gonna say, because I could see. No, you're fine. I just want to clarify, because I was gonna say I could totally see, if it's 1 out of 5 people, it's just being a human genetic. But again, you're totally right with the type of imagery that comes through. It's very strange that it's all in the same, I guess, thing for the most part. I guess it should also be said that for as scary as it is, probably the ones that have the scary moments are also reported the most, I would say. If someone out there is having some lighter versions of this, it's probably going to be a little less reported. So that is just fair disclosure. But very, very interesting. Would you like me to dive into some others that I could share?
Yeah, definitely.
So in the Inuit culture, for example, the people there tell of shamans who can cast a spell when the person's sleeping. The spell is going to cause an experience called... buckle up, everybody. Ukumangarinik. I hope there's no way our Inuits out there are not rolling in there.
Better at that than I would have been.
So basically, during the Ukumangarinik, the person can't move, they can't talk, they can't scream, and they feel like they're visited by a dark, shapeless, or faceless presence, which again, right back on the nose about these kind of shadow figures. There's another one here, or I should say, it'd be good to note that shamanism being a healing practice, it's not actually like a dark practice. So for anyone out there, when you hear about shamanism, usually very akin to the more like earth nature elements. It's all about healing, not very much about destruction. And that usually even translates into our video game lore that we love so much, right? For our gamers out there that know shaman type characters, again, it tends to be very earthly. It's not on like the spell casting and the cursing side so much. So, to hear that kind of difference there, it actually makes me just pose a question again. I wonder, hearing a shaman involved and hearing some of these entities, I wonder if in any way this is kind of related to a something similar to walking the astral plane, to having a spirit guide, because shamanism again ties heavily into that. So I guess in terms of having access to that sort of magic in a way, not totally out of the realm of reality, just different, not one that I'd be familiar with.
Yes. When I was writing up the notes for this, I did some digging into shamanism because, very much from my own knowledge, shamanism is not a dark practice. It is a healing practice. But there is something that is called black shamanism, or dark shamans. And these are shamans who know the practice, who have basically learned the craft, but actually do wish to harm people. They are very rare and I hate using this term, but it is unfortunately a term that is easier than the other terms that they threw out there, but the shamanic kind of culture. But if you actually talk to a shaman, they hate that term. And I apologize to any shamans out there for using it, but I don't remember the other terms off the top of my head, so I apologize.
They're not a fan of the word like shamanic culture?
They do not like the word shamanic. It's actually a different word. It's like it's not shamanism or anything like that, because they don't attribute to being a shaman to religion. And so the ism part is actually akin to very much the like Buddhism, Hinduism, those types of religions, and so they actually very much dislike it. So I apologize to any sort of shamans out there.
That is such good information. Pagan has just totally enlightened me. I'm really glad you shared, and I'm glad you looked that up, because now we know we're going to have to open a topic on shamanism in the future, you guys. This is the exciting thing we talked about.
I actually totally want to learn it. Like, I totally want to learn the craft of shamanism.
It sounds absolutely fascinating, though. It really does. So as you go on that adventure, we want to go with you, Pagan.
Yes.
Finally, here for people around the world, Japanese folklore refers to a summoner who calls upon vengeful spirits to suffocate enemies through a phenomenon called Kanashibari. I may not have butchered that as badly. For some reason, Japanese just has a flow to it that I can maybe do. Kanashibari is how I would say that, and they would probably laugh at me. It is the state of being totally bound, as if contained by metal chains. Wow. So we've talked about what? Brazil, Spain. Who did I just talk about a second ago? Where the Inuit, and then finally the Japanese. All four. Plus, traditional talking about here in America. Someone in Twitch chat here actually mentions that Russian immigrants to the States mentioned something like the Hat Man in the past too. So you can see this is a very shared phenomena around the world, and I guess kind of figuring out what some of these entities are would behoove us. Do we want to maybe give the chat a little bit of detail about shadow people, Pagan?
Yes. So Wikipedia actually describes a shadow person, also known as a shadow figure, shadow being, or a black mass, is the perception of a patch of shadow as a living humanoid figure and interpreted as a presence of a spirit or other entity, believers in the paranormal or the supernatural. So that's kind of the clinical definition of a shadow person. But a shadow person is in so many different cultures, so many different legends, and there's so much lore about them. They link from everything from demonic cultures all the way through the alien types of cultures. And many believe that, including myself, I believe that shadow people are actually not of our universe or not of our world. I believe that they come from somewhere else. And this is just kind of my own personal opinion, and it's not a set completely 100% in stone, because as much as we know about shadow people, we know nothing at the exact same time, because they are such an elusive thing. And the same could be said with the paranormal. We know so much about the paranormal, but at the same time, we know nothing.
Yeah, I agree. And someone in chat actually it was jokingly teasing us a second ago, saying Wikipedia is a source. Yes, actually, for paranormal stuff, considering what it is, Wikipedia is actually a fantastic area to get very cursory. Now, Pagan and I only use it for our cursory stuff. We also use it to start off searches, because keeping in mind the paranormal being something that isn't quantified or qualified in many ways, it is the dangerous part of the craft that most hugely academic sources fail to agree, I guess, on just large topics all around. So when we try and present this stuff, just so anyone out there is wondering, we like to give a good Wikipedia definition for some of it because it's just so... I guess it's so bland that it gives us an agreeable starting point for some of these things. Because shadow people, my goodness. Pagan and I were just talking. We actually plan to, I'll tease for the future, you guys, we're doing a whole episode on shadow people someday. So go hold on to your butts as we get through this. So, yeah.
Grab your blankies, folks. It's going to get scary.
So what the heck? So we're seeing these, what we say, the shadow entities are black masses. That's something I've heard a lot, is that they don't always even get a physical form to them, so much as like a cloud of energy, if you might call it, almost a mist, a miasma in the corner. You've maybe seen in films, but definitely written accounts that testify or claim it to be on the ceiling. So not always even standing or walking, so much as kind of floating and being there. Now, I had one experience in my life where I think I woke up and saw something like that in the corner. Not a scary dream, ironically, but I can say I felt that at least once in my life, and can definitely see why these would be terrifying things for the people that are going through it.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I've dealt with some shadow people in my past as well, and they are somewhere between very curious entities and downright batshit scary. There's not really much happy medium between those two. And the weird thing is they can come in all shapes and forms and sizes. And I've even heard of shadow people even masking themselves often as animals. Like we heard about in Spain with the black animals, often a dog or a cat. Those could also be attributed to the quote unquote shadow people or shadow figure phenomenon. So that's very interesting that, again, we're seeing a lot of shadow people and the associations with the sleep paralysis from around the world.
Well said. So we have coming up here, I guess you have maybe a question in our notes asking about, is the body using astral projection as a defense to kind of, I'm guessing, scoot out of these situations? Did you come across any of that, Pagan? People saying that?
So yes, I did. A lot of sleep paralysis phenomenon. There's people that believe that the entity is actually feeding on the soul or trying to actually steal the soul from the body, and that's why you're kind of held in bed and you can't really move, and you experience this, or you feel a presence over the top of you. Some people have reported also feeling extremely drained after these incidences. So that's kind of one of those things, and astral projection or the out-of-body experience has also been a kind of side effect, I guess, of this kind of phenomenon. So when it comes to these kind of things, I guess the ultimate question would be, is the body basically forcing you to go into an astral projection state or an out-of-body experience state as a defense from whatever is trying to feed off of you? And that's where some people describe astral projection as the soul taking kind of a walk outside of your body. And it's still tied to you. You still have your quote unquote, as we call it in witchcraft, your tether or your cord still tied to your physical body, but it allows you to kind of wander through the spirit realm. So is this why people are describing these types of feeling of flying around the room or flying through? There was one case that I read that they flew through forests, which is very common with astral projection. So are these people being forced into an astral projection state as a defense? And I kind of asked this question, not just of myself, which I think is a possibility, but I also wanted to hear your thoughts on it, Kyle.
Well, I guess that big induces my next question, if you will, which is a question about the phenomena itself. We talked about it being medical. We talked about what aspects of it are paranormal. But to answer the question you just posed, I would have to ask, do we think is sleep paralysis in some ways a paranormally induced sort of thing, or is it paranormally abused? So to differentiate, what I guess I mean by that is paranormal, if it's paranormally induced, that would then be like a spirit coming up to you while you're sleeping and kind of waking you into this phase where then it can take advantage of you, which again fits into the personally described lore of it, right? That there's an entity in the corner and it's coming at me for some reason, whether it's just torturing me by its stare, whether it's on my chest. Again, there's some sort of negative aspect, so you wonder, did this supernatural put them into that phase? Or, again, back on the medical aspect, did the body trigger this and it's a paranormally abused sort of thing, where when you're in that form, maybe it's kind of like a little bit of a beacon to the bottom feeders, if you will, that come by and go, oh, look, there's someone that already can't move, let me just feed off of this person. I smelled blood in the water, like a shark, right? So, they could maybe pick up on that. But if I can, I'll throw in some other little medical anecdotes here that I picked up.
Yes, please do.
So
and then we'll come back to our questions and discuss them in further detail after you throw in your medical bits.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna have a hard time actually even kind of answering these today, because these aren't questions that you and I can answer, right? Because this is got a much larger phenomena. So in some ways, let's look at it like this. On a more medical side of the fence, the phenomena is a disturbance to the parietal cortex of the brain. This is an area that interprets your senses. It allows you to create spatially coordinated images. So can definitely explain the first two things that we talked about, which are the incubus or the weight on the chest, or secondly, the intruder or malevolent entity. This is the part of the brain, it's having a hard time processing. It's been jostled out of sleep. Some people say, they're fully awake when they're in sleep paralysis. Some say they are only partially. So again, if you think about in a partial and a dream sense, if the parietal cortex is having a hard time figuring things out, it's going to be guessing and shooting in the dark. But another one I thought was really interesting that begins to explain some of the others. Again, not medical professionals, but schizophrenia apparently can trigger some of these cases. So schizophrenics, oftentimes you'll hear things where they're hearing voices or seeing things like audio-visual hallucinations, and those can be tracked back to similar parts of the brain. Also, the LSD can affect, and that's where people say these two in particular really can result in the flying around the room. So yeah, I guess if you're looking for an answer to it, I don't know. I don't think we're at necessarily a point yet to give a hard one, because I stand in the middle of, yes, these cases are recurring, but knowing how medically approved, how many medical ways you can affect this, and you can affect the brain through very simple stimulation, even just, electromagnetic stimulation can do crazy things to the brain, both in good and bad ways. I think it's very hard to say. It would be very interesting, in my opinion, if we got people during a sleep study where they're seeing a lot of this. So I guess that's my answer.
So my kind of thoughts on this is when it comes to the people hearing voices and all that, obviously not every case of sleep paralysis that has voices associated with it is linked to schizophrenia. Those are just some of the more medical kind of causes for it. So I just want to definitely differentiate that sometimes there are differences between those two. The LSD,
wait, could you say that again? Between which two?
Between the schizophrenia and the hearing voices. So,
yes.
Definitely on the paranormal spectrum, we'll be hearing those voices, experiencing that, and we'll have no medical causes to back that up. So that's definitely something that links to the more paranormal side as well. And the other aspect is, you interestingly talked about sleep studies. I've had 3 sleep studies done. And I have to, because I have sleep apnea. I've had it since I was a small child. And so the sleep studies are very strange things. And most of the time they take place in a hospital. And hospitals have very weird things that happen. So I can't say that I've ever experienced sleep paralysis per se, but I have had a paranormal experience while having a sleep study done.
Ooh, that sounds like some extra. Stay around for the after show chat. We can probably coax
and I'll tell you all about it.
Coax that out of Pagan. It sounds very like that's such an interesting kind of stance on it. And you bring up a big question when you talked about schizophrenia. And again, how I was referencing it was saying that there is a kind of a linkage between that part of the brain It makes
Yes.
me wonder if people, I wonder if that part of the brain is also tied in with mediumship in some way. But that, again, is a question I just pose for the future. But I wonder if people that are predisposed to seeing spirits and entities like that also have an increase in activity or something like that in that part of the brain. It would be very interesting to see a linkage. And I know what my homework is tonight.
I do know for a fact that some mediums
Hmm.
were diagnosed as schizophrenics back before there was proper testing for it, because people didn't want to believe in the paranormal. They didn't believe that you could be seeing spirits, you could be hearing voices that were not
Hmm.
there, chat. And I say this with air quotes for those who are listening. And for those who were experiencing this, getting diagnosed with schizophrenia is the worst possible case for a medium, because mediums are not crazy. I am a medium. I'm not crazy. I'm not a crazy person. I can very much say that when it comes to that moment of, am I crazy or am I hearing something? When you're first learning how to deal with that, absolutely you think you're batshit nuts.
Hmm.
But after a while, you realize that this is a reality and it's not something psychological. And you can go and get the medical test done and make sure that there's nothing wrong with you. And ultimately, when they come back completely negative, then you can say, well, yeah, I'm a medium and I'm not crazy. But before these tests, having somebody who is a medium and having schizophrenia is definitely, those lines were very blurred back in the day. So I could see that how that would be an interesting correlation. And I'm kind of with you on this one, Kyle. I very
Hmm.
much want to know if the parietal cortex is where the mediumship abilities actually sit.
It's just so interesting. Again, and for anyone out there, I'm truly a guy that believes that way more of, I guess this opens a larger conversation just for way in the future. But I mean, for anyone out there, I guess my stance is one that I recognize how we as humans study and
Yeah.
learn and epistemology and all that sort of stuff. We, like you said, with schizophrenia and just medical conditions in general, often have classified many things only to later realize, oh, yeah, that was a real thing.
Hmm.
And I apply that very much to the paranormal, right? I think that people, not to be rude or skeptics out there, because I think any skeptic that's listening has an interest. I think one of the worst things we could do as scientists or just open-minded people is draw that arbitrary line in the sand and be like, this is reality. Because I said, even though we have thousands of years of experience of, people saying that bloodletting was affixed to this, and they said mercury was affixed to that. Like, we've done all of this, and it's so fun how people in 2020, 100% optional blinders. They're like, no, humans are always right no matter what. And it's like, when? When has that happened in humanity that we called it right the first time? Was it when we said that the Earth was the center of the universe? How about, any of the other times after that? It is that question of like, where do we draw that line between what is accepted science, what is pseudoscience, and then what is just paranormal science, which maybe even to give a small definition of paranormal, which is anything that's outside the realm of accepted science. So this is one of those great cases where science agrees with half of what we talked about tonight, and then science would probably disagree with maybe the second half of what we talked about. However, when you got scientists recognizing that linkage between the two, well, that's just fascinating, isn't it?
It is. And this is, I would say, one of those phenomenon where, uh, you know, I've read so many stories on this in the last week or so that people go to their doctors and they say, oh, I'm experiencing sleep paralysis. And then they say, I don't know if y'all can hear that. Apparently,
Mm.
one of my dogs is standing right outside my door and is itching.
Oh, gosh,
It's like
that's spooky.
vibrating through the walls. So
Spooky.
I'm just like, what is that noise? Apologies, chat.
We can't. You're good.
Um, so the, uh, when it comes to the sleep paralysis, there's so much phenomenon that is associated with people seeing the aspects of, am I crazy? Is this happening? Is it real? And they've had medical tests done, and the medical community is coming back and saying, this might actually be paranormal. there's nothing wrong with you.
Indeed.
And when the medical community is coming back to you and saying this might be paranormal, that is not only a huge leap for the science behind the paranormal, but is also really terrifying and really crazy.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. So one guy we said we were going to talk about a little earlier and kind of didn't. I've got a picture up on screen so chat can see him, is the Hat Man. We've talked around him, but just to give you a very brief synopsis, we kind of went back and forth, or maybe I did, in wanting to talk about this guy, because as many pieces of evidence that there are on the internet about this Hat Man, there are, I'd say equal to half of that amount is it's just Reddit reports and, homebrewed stories, which, not to say that stuff is completely invalid, but I think pretty much everyone that's been to Reddit knows it is a storytelling community by its very nature, with its Reddit no sleep and all these other things. So Slender Man, all that kind of stuff, it makes me wonder how much of this is documentable real versus how much of this is kind of just in our minds. But I guess that's what this topic is about. So to give a very brief synopsis, this Shadow Man, this Hat Man, appears with what's said to be either a pointy or wide brim hat. The brim seems to be the recurring feature. If you Google him, you see a lot of similar imagery about this guy. But he apparently is one of the people that will show up in the sleep paralysis cases. Some say that he actually leads or is the leader of many shadow people. But it's a hard one to say. I'm not sure. He's a guy I'm very interested in putting a pin in and learning more as time goes on, because I want to know. I want to see this develop. Though at the same time, it feels like, I don't want to say just a new phenomenon, but maybe a new internet craze. So there's not a ton of information out there on him yet.
That's very true. And I have a feeling that the Hat Man is probably going to be one of the Chaos and Shadow potential unsolved cases that we're going to keep researching as time goes on, because of the fact that in reality, there really isn't that much information. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of user accounts. Again, I say that with air quotations because a lot of the things that I was seeing were on sites like Reddit. And they just really are, nothing is super substantiated yet. And perhaps maybe this is just a thing of nobody wanted to talk about it because it was too strange and too weird and too scary. And then somebody did, and they're like, I've had the same experience. And that's kind of how a lot of paranormal experience phenomenon, I suppose you could say, comes out. And people don't want to talk about it at first because we have this great stigma, especially in America, of if you say that you've experienced something paranormal, you're automatically crazy. And it kind of goes back to that schizophrenia and mediumship kind of thing, where you're not allowed to break outside the norm. And so a lot of people, unfortunately, their cases really do go undocumented. They go unspoken because they just don't want to be labeled as crazy, which is really sad.
It is very, very, very sad. Hey, we're talking about all the time with the UFO stuff, right? Like, that is the big thing, is we have these trained professionals who are flying billion-dollar aircrafts that are seeing these things, and yet, they can't report things they're seeing because, like you just said, there's a stigma around the paranormal. So we need to buck that. And we're getting a little bit low on time for this episode because this has been such a phenomenal topic. But
it really has.
I want to give you guys 4 quick kind of medically suggested routes that you could take if you're eager to prevent sleep paralysis, because this can be something that really inhibits people's lives. None of these things are outside the medical realm, so I feel very safe giving these to you. These are common life things. Reducing caffeine intake. When is that bad for you? I mean, it makes you uncomfortable, and I love my caffeine, but it makes sense. Caffeine intake, definitely at the wrong time, is going to mess up your sleep schedule. And it does seem like the people that are predisposed to having sleep paralysis may also very much have underlying sleep disorders to begin with, right? Just whether they're light sleepers, whether their rhythm is all thrown off, whatever that case might be.
Melatonin instead of whack, something.
Yep, they seem triggerable by it. So again, that would be one of the first things a doctor would say if you kind of had insomnia and all that is, we'll cut the caffeine, we're going to reduce that. So that's a safe one. Same with alcohol too. Alcohol is also very much in that caffeine realm. A lot of these were tied to jet lag sort of things, or people say it's very tied to that. So folks will say, they had a flight and then they may have had sleep paralysis following, which makes, again, total sense because you are blowing that sleep schedule out of the water. Finally, the most common that I think messes up all of our sleep schedules is stress, because no matter how much you want to avoid it, no matter how much you want to put off that project that you know you shouldn't even be worrying about yet, it has a great way of being that last thing you think about before you go to sleep at night, when you have that, oh, crap, did I actually do the thing I was supposed to do? Did I pay that bill? And so those stresses, again, interrupt. They get in the way. I mean, how many of you have had a work dream before? I may take sleep paralysis over a work dream. As a guy that's had both, I'll tell you what, I've woken up chipper with the sleep paralysis, but those work dreams kill me. So again, it all ties together. You know, our dreams are very much influenced by our waking reality. And I say vice versa a bit as well. You know, definitely sets my mood for the day. So taking good care of yourself is a big thing with all of this. And I feel pretty content, Pagan, to kind of leave them with that. We have a listener story that we're going to read out in our after show today. Yes. Anything else you want to tack on here, Pagan? Because we're going to get through some call outs at the end, but anything else with supernatural folks?
The only supernatural thing that I would suppose that we've really, they do say one last thing about how you can prevent it. Some say it actually is just unavoidable because it's a form of dreaming and we can't stop ourselves from dreaming.
Whoa, that's a fair point. Well,
so sorry to leave you on a creepy note, but this is a paranormal podcast.
It is. Well, and it's a great reminder. I just talked about listener stories. We encourage you guys, go over to the website, chaosandshadow.com. We would love to hear your listener stories. We have a great submission form. We're actually going to work on expanding it out and giving it its own webpage. That way it can collect some other information. You can share as much or as little as you like, but I've added to it. Whenever we go live with the newer variant, it'll have the time and date, also location that you can put in. That way you could even tell us just country-wise so we know, or state, whatever would guide us, just so we're hearing, because we've got, gosh, what would you say, upwards of 10, close maybe to 15 stories that have come in now?
Definitely at least that many, and they've come from all parts of the world, and we have a lot of American folks, obviously, because we're based in America, but we do have a few people from overseas and the European countries and all that. So I would say keep submitting the stories, and we love hearing from you no matter where you're from. We want to hear them all.
About it, we're like episode 7, I think, so that means that 2 people have been sending in a story per episode roughly, which is fantastic. You guys, we love it. Share away. Just please, we absolutely adore that. We called out some Patreons earlier, so again, if you guys want to get on that list, if you want to get your shout out in an episode, please, patreon.com/chaos and shadow. We'll have all the links in your podcast player or YouTube in the description below. But these, again, are all up on the website, so you can very, very easily grab them. I want to do a 5-star shout-out, review shout-out from our friend Kick. These mean a ton to us. If you are using iTunes to listen to this or any other podcast platform that lets you write up a review, we would love to include these. We put them up on the website as well. But Kick wrote in and said, I absolutely love the podcast. Kyle and Pagan really do their research and have put together a very polished and professional podcast full of all kinds of information and interesting topics, frequently updated with lots of free content for those into the paranormal and extra amazing goodies for those who want to subscribe. Okay, Kick's doing us a shout out in her review. I love it. Kick, subtle promo it the whole way. Really worth checking out. Yeah, if you're into the paranormal, these 2 really know their stuff and have a real passion for the subject, and it shows in their work. Hell, that's a really nice one.
Thank you, Kick.
Thank you so much. So if you guys want to send those in, those help a ton. You can just go on to iTunes, drop that review, Google. I'm trying to think where all you can do it. We use a site that's growing and growing and growing called Podchaser. So if you guys spin that website up, we're on there, and they have a very nice review feature. Also, why don't we talk about our Twitter a little bit? You've been kicking butt over there.
Yes. You can find us on Twitter at Chaos and Shadow. Our Twitter, we post all sorts of different things. We retweet from our fellow paranormal friends as well. So you will see all sorts of great content coming through our Twitter. You can also stay up to date with what Kyle and I are doing behind the scenes, and just kind of some fun little stuff that we're working on and listening to and reading throughout the week. So if you guys want to, go check us out on the Chaos and Shadow Twitter. You can also find us on Instagram at Chaos and Shadow Podcast. Again, all sorts of really cool stuff that we just find super interesting, stuff we're reading, stuff we're watching, great little tidbits, fun little kind of promo stuff. and all sorts of great stuff. So check those out. If you can't find us on chaosandshadow.com and you just want to email us directly, you can email us directly at mysteriesofchaosandshadow@gmail.com if you have a great story that you want to share with us. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, please. And if you want to share it with friends, that is how podcasts live and breathe. So if you've got creepy paranormal friends out there that you think would enjoy this, family, whoever it is, send them a link to it from your favorite podcast player. They'll get a kick out of it, I'm sure. Pagan, I'm not letting you off the hook without pimping out your own Twitch stream as well.
You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/PaganWolf13. I play all sorts of fun things, from Dying Light to The Sims to Fallout 76, and I also paint on my streams. Probably on Saturday we're going to do a fun painting of some sort, so you guys should come check it out, and I look forward to seeing all of you. And you can always talk to me about the paranormal on my show as well, on my channel. I love talking about it pretty much nonstop. So
very true.
Live, eat, and breathe paranormal.
Yeah, that happened in Discord the other day. I was just hanging out. We were playing a game, and a friend came by in the Discord server, and they were just chatting about their paranormal story. So I'll say, get your butts in there. Discord.gg/KDS. And I think the very last shout out for today will be come on by the Twitch stream. If you want to subscribe, that's amazing. You get ad-free viewing over here, all kinds of cool stuff. You get fun, cute emotes that are all little cryptids as well, from krakens to goat men to aliens. It's a great amount. So thanks to our friend Clerical Apathy for making those for the show. Huge shout out to Dangerous, who made our intro and outro music for today. Gonna have links in the bio for that. Just absolutely blown away by that. So huge shout out. And again, I guess I didn't say it. Twitch.tv/Kyle Dempster Studios is where you can find us. We are live here 7 p.m. Eastern is when we formally kick off the podcast on Thursday nights. Saturday, we have something in the works for the future. Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern is the time of us just dorking around watching some of those absolutely ridiculous top 10 paranormal videos, because I almost cry with how bad some of the fake editing is, and some of them are compelling. Some of them are downright. Pagan, you had us watching a girl filming a TikTok, and I couldn't.
Gosh. I about died of laughter. And honestly, we call them spooky videos because they're clickbaited as spooky, paranormally kind of haunted videos of some sort. But truth be told, they're absolutely hilarious. So if you want to come by for kind of a spooky time and kind of a good laugh time and just a roundabout great time to talk with us about paranormal, ask your questions, all that good stuff, drop by on Tuesdays.
Indeed. Thank you all for listening. We will talk to you guys next week, 7 p.m. Eastern here on Twitch, and it'll be on your podcast player probably on Saturday. That looks like the day we're getting them up there. So enjoy. You guys be safe. Don't forget to submit your stories, and we'll catch you next week. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Everybody, and welcome to the post show.
Welcome to the post show, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us for that amazing episode on sleep paralysis. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as we did. It was a little on the creepy side this week, don't you think?
I loved it. That was great. I hope everyone out there enjoyed it too. Hope we've been definitely trying. Huge shout out to Prince for giving us extra time in his life to kind of just shoot the shit as a producer with us in a way, to talk us through like little things we can clean up on the show, because all that means a lot. I think this was probably That, I would say this has been maybe one of our smoothest, cleanest, most natural episodes that we have done to date. Just it flowed so damn well, so naturally. I dig it.
Yes, it did. Absolutely.
I'm going to save our audio to the wrong file, chat. We had a question in there. Who had some questions for us? So I think it was Godguesser was asking earlier, do you need some sort of affinity to come in contact with paranormal stuff? Because I've never had anything even close to paranormal happen in my life. I don't know if Godguesser's still around.
Godguesser, if you're still here, the answer is no, you do not. The one thing that I definitely tell a lot of people when it comes to the paranormal is sometimes paranormal entities simply don't want to talk to people. And it's the same with you. You don't always want to talk to every person that you come across. And you're not always going to want to interact. And you're not always wanting to smile, especially if somebody is poking and prodding you. Eventually, you're just going to be like, I'm going to just fuck off and be like, goodbye.
Yeah.
Because you just don't want to deal with it. And I think when it comes to paranormal entities, they're the exact same way. They just don't always want to talk to people. They don't always want to tell their story to every five and dime person that comes by. So don't be offended if they don't talk to you or if they don't mess with you or if they don't do anything with you. And you may also be experiencing stuff that's paranormal, but you may have such a high threshold of it being like, that was weird. All right, whatever. And literally you just completely brush it off and you never even realize it's paranormal.
Indeed.
You just find it interesting.
Indeed. Bala Boy asked a question about WoW, asking if I'm still playing. I have not played in a while. I did not renew my sub. If you're still in there, I know many people are. Actually, is GRK still playing that? I'd wonder.
I do still play, just not very often.
Pagan's still in there. Lunar, we have a story from you if we're still okay to share it, if you don't have any problem with that. I think you marked this as a good to share, but, double check with you, make sure you're cool with it. Because Lunar says, that was food. There's so much food for thought for me in that episode. Yeah. There's some debate on that subject. Some of us are said to be in a sort of anti-weird zone. Oh, my. So Lunar's story reads that this was about 10 years ago, but it gives me chills to this day. I sometimes get sleep paralysis, but this time I kept hearing a voice talking to me, but my brain could not retain or make sense of anything it said. It felt like it was sitting on the pillow next to me. I sleep alone on a queen-size bed, and I could not see it. And it sounded like a very young, childlike voice. I remember somehow having a moment of clarity from the terror and asking it, "Are you a boy or a girl?" It answered the only words I retained from the event: "We are many." And then I woke up. That's a great one, Lunar. That is absolutely a great one. I had an experience similar to that, Lunar, where I woke up speaking quote-unquote Latin to some black entity in the corner. And I say it wasn't a scary dream because I was just like, bah, 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 and he was like, bah, 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 and I'm like, and I went back to bed. It was like an update. I don't know what that was. We just had our powwow for the week, I guess.
I mean, maybe you've been speaking Latin in your sleep the whole time and you just never knew, and that you just kind of woke up at that moment and you're like, I was speaking Latin. I can't speak Latin. How is this a thing?
My Latin knowledge.
I speak French in my sleep as well.
Oh, my Latin knowledge exists, but it's very, very, very minimal. I know some. Yeah, it's very little. I can talk to you about boats is about it. I don't know why. Scappa. Let's talk all about boats, chat.
Let's talk about the boats.
The WoW fandom has for the most part, it sounds like, died down. Let's see if Bala Boy. Yeah. His sounds like mystical. Hi, by the way. Lost interest in WoW, and so did GRK. It is a game that is like in a weird spot at the moment, so I definitely feel you there. It's without. Someone else said that. Oh, Alan said that earlier. Alan said might play more whenever the new update comes through. So Shadowlands will probably bring a lot of people back.
It's very possible. I do find that with MMOs, a lot of they go through highs and lows, especially around new content. Mm-hmm. A lot of people just push through, and then they're just like, "Hey, burnt out. I'm tired of grinding."
Goats on boats, they say.
Boats.
Oh, Mac didn't even redo her sub for WoW. Yeah, and that was Mac's first time. Like I said, I think WoW is just a game that it might be a lot more approachable for people come this fall whenever it moves into a much more succinct leveling process. So again, I'm not writing it off by any means, but I also don't think now is necessarily the time to grind it out and feel it out. So pause on that until at least Shadowlands come out and then give it a fair take.
Agreed.
We saw, what was another one I want to call? Oh, Temmet said that interesting to watch. Never had an experience sleep paralysis myself. The closest I've ever had was night terrors, which is fun because that falls under the same exact umbrella. You basically are having like a cousin style, experience, or brother sister almost. I think they all fall under parasomnia, which is night terrors, sleep paralysis. Like you said, there's some like sexual component to it too. Of people that have either dreams or, something like that. So it all falls under the larger umbrella of parasomnia, and all absolutely terrifying. Even the word is not a very nice word. I don't know. It's a creepy term.
It's like, I'm sorry, you're dealing with night terrors, which falls under parasomnia. I'm dealing with what?
Yeah.
That's literally how it would come across if you didn't know anything about it.
Absolutely. I went back to Final Fantasy 14, says Mystical. Good on you. We've been playing a lot of Don't Starve together here, and the audience, I think, has been loving it. People have just been eating that up. So if anyone out there is a Don't Starve Together fan, please, please, please come on by when we're doing that. I logged into WoW after a few days, and no one in the guild had been on like 3 weeks. Yeah, I think we all kind of dried up at that same time.
Yeah, I play like maybe once in a blue moon. Very rare. I'm probably not going to renew my sub.
It's just, I think WoW's a very hard game to get into, and I know I personally feel extraordinary amounts of FOMO when I spin that game up. Like, I'm like, oh my God, there's so much to do, and I know none of it. And I'm like, and then I just get stressed, and I'm like, I'll just go work on work. That's easier than worrying about that. Getting wrong.
I like The Sims these days because The Sims is very chill and it doesn't require a whole lot of brain activity, which is great. I like games that don't require brain activity.
That's fair. Max saying she's looking for a long-term MMO too. Yeah, I keep hearing people talk about New World, and like I said, I'm probably at the lowest I've been in interest for that game, just because, well, it's not even scheduled to come out until spring 2021. So we've still got about half a year plus left on that coming out. I'm guessing like 8 months or so. So that one's been hard because we got like up until. It was like 1 or 2, no, we were I think 1 month out from launch, and then it got postponed 6 months. And then it was like, okay, now we're another month out, and then it got another like 12 months at that rate. So yeah, it's been hard. GR Cases actually saw it on the stream. It looked okay. That's about what I've thought of it too. So I don't know, chat. I don't know that that's necessarily, I'm going to try it, but I don't have any, huge faith in it being like a saving grace per se. And in fact, like we said, I'm way interested in getting this thing off the ground. Come on by, you guys. We got lots and lots and lots of stuff to discuss as we go through this. For your notes on Shadow
People. Guy says, for your notes on Shadow People for the future episode, I would suggest least putting it in the margins a few named Shadow People, like Gurning Man of Glasgow. I've never heard of that. I'll have to do some research in that, but I'll put it in our notes for sure.
Yeah. Oh, Zarian saying hit me up for stories. Absolutely. New World is so far off. I can't get hype. Alan, I'm the same way about that. Once it's released, I think it's worth a try as well. And it's not a scary price tag on it. At what, like $40 maybe? It's not terrible. So, again, there's no good reason for me not to, but I'm with you, Alan. Like, my hype meter is just literally running on empty or like negative. I'm like, it's not that your game is bad. It's just that I've roller coastered so much, and I built the roller coaster on the side. So I'm just tired. I'm tired. Kick back and relax. GRK, you have a great night. We're going to bounce out of here fairly soon too, you guys.
Yeah. Also, for those of you who want to kind of see our episode notes and see kind of our research, you should head over to the Patreon. One thing free that we do every Saturday when the episode launches on like Spotify and iTunes and all the basically podcast players, we also release our Vault Notes, which has all of our notes and all of our research, and sometimes a few tidbits extra in there, and those will come out on Saturday around noonish.
Yeah,
so
lots of good. I'm showing it as you're talking about it. Freaking love it. So again, even if you're not a subscriber, if you guys want to drop it a follow or anything like that, like if you throw together a Patreon, we want to make everyone feel regardless of everyone's means, especially with the apocalypse and all this dawning. We just want to make sure we're getting you guys some good content. We've also been changing some things up here and there too. One of the things is we've taken, instead of like investing work into maybe a more formal write-up of the work we're planning for the week, instead we're kind of just tossing that up on the social medias as like an easier, more, what's the word, casual, I guess, sort of outlook for the week forecast.
Yeah, casual, I would say. Not that the other one wasn't casual, but I would say that this one is definitely more casual. Yeah. And it can be seen by a lot more people.
Very, very true. What's the other thing I was going to say? We have one more thing.
Vault notes have been free for a couple of weeks now.
Yep. Vault notes are free.
Tuesdays are free. You just read an article that was released this weekend.
That was part of the monthly one, right? That was the when we did I did the ABCs of UAPs. If you guys want to check that out,
article.
That's a fun one. That's a really good one. That, again, if you guys are interested in UFO stuff, that one's about like walking you through it and like explaining some of the more introductory. So I think like the great question or the great comment that 12-sided guy came out with there, where he's like include some of the names. We will definitely try. It might actually shift up that we don't include too many formal names, because what Peg and I want to do, we want to make sure we're putting out about 45 minutes of concise content. And then after that, everything can open up. But it's a very interesting thing when you talk about, when we're trying to do the paranormal, like we said earlier, it's like chipping away at a massive glacier. If you burrow too deeply on one topic, you're probably going to confuse a lot of people, because so many of them borrow from each other. To talk about UFOs is to also talk about aliens and abductions and things that aren't UFOs that could be. And that's just an example. And the same came up with shadow people too, where we talked about, this is an episode on sleep paralysis, not shadow people even. And that's where we decide, we're like, holy crap, we're going to have to break that out as its own, like, kind of nest egg. And that's a great one. Great call out there too, 12-sided. So just so you guys know why, we might be holding back on some stuff just from a production standpoint, it is the idea of how can we get the most in there without overwhelming. And if you guys ever find an episode confusing, please reach out to one of us on this side. We'd love that feedback too. You can use the same feedback form. If you find any of them to be way too scatterbrained going forward, like, wow, you didn't explain very well, we need to hear that. That's great feedback, because
it is.
Again, this is a mountain, not a molehill.
The other thing too is sometimes we will get to a topic and realize the topic is so large that we can only fit part of the topic in, and sometimes it'll be broken up over a couple of episodes. Or is what we'll do is we will just basically touch briefly on it and then set it aside to break it down further in the future and kind of give it a comeback after we've done so many other episodes. The other thing that we do as well, so like 12-sided sent us this great name of this named shadow person. That might be a really good article that we could write up for Patreon as well. So It's not that we don't use the information. It will get used in some fashion. We just have to figure out exactly where best to fit it in. And sometimes we realize that some of the stories that are submitted to us are such huge cases that we have to take time to break them down and realize, how do we want to tackle this? What are we going to do with this? Is this something that we can even use in the show? And if not, it may just sit in our case logs, which we have several case logs right now sitting on our figurative desks of sorts that we're just kind of piecing through slowly, because they're just so massive that we can't even bring them to the table just yet.
It's true. 12-sided says, goodness, never for the end product. I know very well how shows stretch on forever, right? Absolutely. Why I don't do shows on subjects. The few I did ended up being too hard. It's so hard, man, because we could talk about these forever. And it is kind of us. I think we've been doing, like, I'm very proud of Pagan and I, in just the natural flow of the shows ending at a good time. Because we looked over some statistics out there, and I'd be curious, you guys share your input too, what you listen to for podcasts. A lot of people apparently like podcasts that are under an hour. I am about a 1 hour mark, man. I like 45 minutes to an hour and a half is probably where my prime listening is. I can do that. 45 is probably like a one-time setting. Maybe I have to break it up. an hour and a half, I'm probably going to listen to it in chunks, half on the way to work, for example, was what I used to do, and then half on the way back. So we split it and, try and make it a good way. But, to make sure we never miss any of that 12 side, if you want to gather any of that story together, you could totally submit that to us so it doesn't get lost. And I'll just pimp out. I thought that page would appear for you guys. Maybe it's not up there yet. Oh, well, you don't get an example of it. But the more like filled out version of this does not look much different, but it will be coming in the future to have just a little more information. And again, back to all this sort of stuff, you can find all kinds of cool stuff up here.
I was going to say, if you could, you should show them just kind of a glimpse of the overall Trello board.
Oh, yeah. And did you see that I have a second one now?
Yeah, I did see that. I saw that you have your ideas one, and then we have the formal, and I also have an ideas one of mine that you're not on.
Oh my!
I probably should add you.
Sure. I mean, it's not that I really care to poke and prod, but I did steal all of my ideas out of here to make them separate because it was getting so wildly large. Like, this is the one that Pagan and I work with, and then this is the example of my own, which is a lot smaller. Again, none of this was really super intentional, but I've just been going through and like adding my own interests. Clearly, I'm very much into the UFOs lately. So my UFO category is wild. But it's very interesting because I've been trying to like plot together some weird stories. Like this one I heard about just today, William Schaffner from the UK, pilot missing from... Yeah, this was fascinating. So this is on Wikipedia one I found. It was pointed to this. So this guy goes missing from the Royal Air Force chasing a UFO, and his plane is found in the ocean completely sealed. Like he did not emergency eject. He did not leave the cockpit, but his body wasn't inside the cockpit, so they say. So where did the man go? I don't know.
There's so many wild stories when it comes to UFOs that are like that.
And what I found is that so many of them are like a blip on the radar. So what Pagan and I guess, sorry to cut you off, is to say I've been trying to document them because I'm like, I will probably never hear of this story again unless I make a note. That is like the hard part of it. Happily provide research and such. I've got so much. Oh gosh, yes, 12 side. We love that.
Yes, we would love them.
Oh, we would love to just tap you in general as someone that knows this stuff. Stay in contact with us, please, because Pagan and I so want to get out there in the field whenever we have the finances to do it, and whenever COVID frees up, so we don't have to worry about dying. Would be great. Not eager to become ghosts ourselves in the field. Well, I mean, maybe I am to haunt the shit out of people, but. Not to pay medical bills in the United States. I'm not.
Yeah, no.
How about that? I'm ready to haunt people, but not pay medical bills.
That has to communicate through my mediumship abilities. Eventually, give me a migraine, and I love you, Kyle, but don't give me a migraine.
I'll be here every Thursday for the show. It's 12-sided. Zach Baggins or Aaron. Yeah, I see what Mac's going at. Yes.
Oh wow.
Well, chat.
That's great.
I'm ready to bounce out of here, Pagan, because I'm a bit peckish myself.
Yes, let's do it. Chat, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for sticking through the podcast with us. Thank you for just being